Good day and welcome to episode 30 of my YouTube video series. And yeah, it's already 30 episodes, and thank you for everyone who has followed so far. The YouTube channel has had a slow but steady growth. In fact, I think nowadays I realize a lot of young people are watching stuff on TikTok, so I've done a lot of videos on TikTok as well, and the TikTok views are pretty strong. So maybe later I'll share in the link below my TikTok link as well if you like those shorter format videos. Okay, so in today's episode, I'm going to cover a topic that actually can be done like a class, comparing Singapore and Malaysia property investment. This is something you can do like over 2 days, right? But I'm going to try and do this in about 30 minutes, where I want to share the high level comparisons. Why you should consider Malaysia. I know Malaysia property doesn't have a good reputation in recent years because the Malaysian property market has been in a downturn for some time now. I think it's close to 10 years. And that's a quite long downturn, right? If you compare to Singapore, 10 years, the cycle is already one cycle in Singapore. But in Malaysia, I think our most recent down cycle has been quite long. Maybe that's also because the last up cycle was also quite long. The last up cycle was also almost 10 years. So maybe that's why the fall has been that long as well. So, but although we're comparing Singapore and Malaysian property investments here today, my target audience for this video is Malaysians working in Singapore or Singaporeans who have interest to invest in Malaysia. The idea is to have you compare so you can better understand what you need to look out for, what you need to do when you look in real estate investments in Malaysia. Because I believe that the upcycle is coming soon. Property markets move in cycles, or that's quite a common thing. So it's quite, to me, it's quite obvious that the Malaysian property market has to come to an upswing soon. Most likely, it will happen after the coming Malaysian elections and after the recession. The global recession is about to hit us. If not end of this year, then probably early next year. I think now is the right time to buy in Malaysian property investments because there are a lot of good deals and blood is so-called flowing in the streets, right? So I hope today's video will help you appreciate the differences. And if you, as always, if you need to find out more, feel free to drop me an email or drop me a message after this, and we can chat in more detail if you're interested in looking in Malaysian more detail. Okay, so let's start off this video with the usual introduction about myself.
Director of Alpha Marketing at Ryan.
Speak in Malaysian. So my name is Ryan. Nama saya Ryan.
6,000 incoming supply in Johor. This is
I'm writing thank you for attending today's presentation on Skandar Malaysia. Okay, so my name is Ryan Khoo. I'm a Malaysian, but I'm also a Singapore PR, but I've been in Singapore since 2009. So I've been in Singapore quite a long time. I'm almost half Singaporean, or already half Singaporean. My wife is Singaporean. My kids are dual citizenship right now. Okay, so they will have to choose when they turn 18. I'm a property investor first. I've done a lot of real estate investments since 2005. I've bought lots of property in Malaysia, Singapore. I'm quite familiar with both markets. That is, I guess, my unique niche. I've been a speaker for Property Guru, for iProperty, for ST Property. I've written articles for HProp. I've had quite a long, varied property investment career. I'm also a property agent in Singapore and Malaysia with ERA. I run my own consultancy firm, Alpha Marketing, that helps investors to look at Malaysian real estate. And yeah, that's basically what I do. So some disclaimer, everything here represents my own opinions, and you do as an investor have to consider your own personal financial situation before you make an investment decision here, right? And of course, I do have a biasness towards investing in Malaysia. This is my recommendation right now. Yeah, but of course, everyone's situation differs, and everyone needs to seek their own opinion for before making any big decisions. Okay, so I want to cover in the first few slides a comparison between Singapore and Malaysia in general, right, in terms of the property markets there. Now, if you look at Singapore, Singapore is a first world country. Lee Kuan Yew and the first generation in Singapore has done a tremendous job in transforming Singapore from an island, third world economy island, into first world economy, first world city. And of course, with a first world city, you have first world property prices. So property prices in Singapore are high. They're comparable to places like Hong Kong, Tokyo, New York, California, right? They're not cheap, right? And if you take this money in Singapore, you go to other parts of the world, you can buy lots of stuff here, not just Malaysia, anywhere in the world, right? You can do a lot, right? Like I don't know how many of you have been watching Netflix series, right? There are some property agent shows there, right? Like for $3 million in the US, you can like buy um fantastic bungalows, freehold, huge land in prime Los Angeles, for example, right? In Singapore, 3 million Sing, I mean, you can buy a landed lah, but it's fairly small, right? And not necessarily the most prime part of Singapore. Yeah, so just to show you that Singapore prices are expensive, are high. Of course, this also incomes in Singapore are also very high. Singapore has a very high GDP per capita. That's over 30,000, and the economy in Singapore is pretty strong. Singapore is one of the few countries in the world with a triple A grade by the rating agencies, and that's because Singapore government has been extremely efficient and extremely prudent, right, in managing their finances. If you look at Malaysia, Malaysia is still a third world country, although we independence with Singapore roughly the same time. But I mean, Malaysia is still a third world country, still growing. I mean, growing has its benefits. I mean, the benefits is that growth in Malaysia is still higher because it's compared to a mature economy. There's a lot of potential in Malaysia. The question is how much we can realize this potential, right? And Singapore is also an island, right? So being an island with just over about 600 plus square kilometers, there's a lack of land. And when you have a lack of land, there's always a problem with the amount of supply that you can build, right, for real estate. And this results in a lot of high-rise property in Singapore, right? A lot of HDBs or condos and high prices for high-rise, right? In Malaysia, there's still quite a lot of land. Land is fairly plentiful. So landed property is still quite affordable. And because it's still affordable, landed property is also quite desired, right? If you ask yourself, you want to buy landed or buy condo, 9 times out of 10, given the chance, you will want to buy landed. I mean, in Singapore, it's different because Singapore, some people don't in Singapore don't even get exposed to landed property, right? They think it's impossible, right? But in Malaysia, it's still a very common option for Malaysians to think, I want to buy landed or want to buy condo. But yeah, I mean, landed is still preferred where possible, right? But I mean, in cities, right, especially in places like KL, right, a lot of landed property are not that affordable either. The affordable landed could be quite far off, in very far off suburbs away from the city center, and thus away from work. And so a lot of people in KL are okay to accept high rise because they have no choice, right? Landed is either very far away or expensive. So and may not even really have supply in downtown KL anyway. So that's what I mean by differs from city to city, right? In Penang is also the same because Penang is an island. So Penang also, a lot of locals in Penang are okay with high rise because there is not much choice. Landed properties, mainly on the mainland of Malaysia, which they may not want, right? In Johor, however, Johor is probably the only major city in Malaysia where land is still available. Even so, the trend in the past 5-6 years, you can see that even the landed suburbs are getting further and further away from city center. So this trend will happen, right? Eventually, even in JB, right, in Johor, because land will run out, right? Even if there is land, and when landed properties move further and further away from the suburbs, right, people have to choose high rise because high rise is nearer the city. So that trend you'll see it anywhere in the world, right? So, but Malaysians in general still prefer landed where they can because landed is available and it's a more obvious. I mean, it's quite a common option. Okay, so in Singapore, Singapore government is a fantastic government, right? Any of you, I bet any of you to argue this with me, but the Singapore government is the most efficient government in the world, probably, right? Where supply is done well, town planning is done well. Malaysia, of course, is not done as well. I mean, there's still some bureaucracy. There's still a lot of errors and mistakes done by the government, whether the central government or the state government, compared to Singapore. And in Singapore, property transaction data is very available, very transparent. I mean, in Singapore, right? If you want to buy property in Singapore, right, a lot of data is available, right? A lot of relevant data is available. In Malaysia, there is some data, but the data may not be relevant, right, or may not be market friendly, right? They for example, they could have a data that is not written in the format that is useful to us, right? It's written in a format useful to the bureaucracy, but not useful to us, right, as investors, right? So that's the problem, right? If the data is available. So that's why sometimes I don't like to talk about Malaysian property data because you look at it and honestly, you can't really tell much out of it, which is why I don't talk about Malaysian property data too much, right? Sometimes it's relevant, but a lot of times it's not, right? And actually, this problem is it happens in many countries across the world, right? I've seen Singaporeans try to go to invest overseas, right? Not just Malaysia. They look at UK or Australia. They plug some data from some government website and they try to make some inference from there. But I mean, a lot of these Singapore foreign countries, right? Whether Australia or UK, even their data is also not very complete. If you ask me, it's bits and pieces. It doesn't really tell you the full picture, right? So it's not a Malaysia only problem. This is a problem across the world. I think again, Singapore is probably one of the few countries in the world where property data is such available and so transparent, right? That attests to the efficiency of how Singapore is. Okay, so it's not just a Malaysia only problem. Okay, so next, why would you invest in these two countries, right? If you come to the top of your mind, why would you invest in Malaysia or why would you invest in Singapore, right? So Singapore, mature economy, stable government, right? First class global city, right? When you say first class global cities, this is important because Singapore has great connectivity to the rest of the world. Many foreign companies, if they want to expand to Southeast Asia, Singapore is always somewhere on their list, right? They will not say, oh, I mean KL sometimes, but KL is not always on the list all the time, right? But Singapore, I think is 9 times out of 10 is always on the list for new HQ, new regional headquarters, right? Singapore is always considered, right? Because Singapore is a great city with great infrastructure and great connectivity and talent, and this makes Singapore a big choice a lot of the time, right? And as a result, right, the economy is strong. As a result of that, the property market is also strong, right? So if you look at Malaysia, Malaysia is not that bad. I mean, Malaysia, if you look at it from a development perspective, within Southeast Asia, actually Malaysia is the second most developed economy if you think about it, right? Really, you go and look at it. Of course, it's a distant second, right? I think we are not even halfway there compared to Singapore, but Malaysia is the second most developed. Thailand is probably the third just behind us, right? But in terms of development, right, Malaysia has great infrastructure, right? A great rule of law, English law similar to Singapore, so the rule of law is pretty similar, right? And a lot of Malaysians speak English, right? There is a reason why Singapore poached a lot of Malaysian talent to work in Singapore, right? Of course, with the perspective of Iskandar JB is just next to Singapore, right? That gives Malaysia or JB in specific a big advantage, right, in terms of trying to take some economic spillover from Singapore. So this is why I feel that Malaysia is a good place to invest, right? Of course, some people talk about Vietnam or Indonesia, right? Those are big markets with big local economies. It depends on the type of investment you're trying to do, right? Type of business you're trying to do, right? Where Vietnam or Indonesia may be better. But if you talk about pure development, pure rule of law, pure what do you call infra setup, right? I think Malaysia is the second best in Southeast Asia right now, and that is a lot of plus for it. Of course, you can talk bad about the politics. I think politics is a problem in Malaysia right now. It's a problem also in many places in the world, right? Even in Thailand, right? Lots of people love Thailand, but you forget Thailand is ruled by a military government, right? So yeah, but yeah, politics is the things. Singapore has had the advantage of having a strong politics in the past 50, 60 years of Singapore's life. Okay, but let's move on, right? Let's move on. So next is yeah, because of its Singapore's an island, right, and the limited plus controlled supply by the government makes property in Singapore a good store of wealth. And you've seen this time and time again, right? I've spoken about this many times. I probably don't repeat too much, but if you buy property in Singapore, the value is likely to hold, right? Even if you do not make a lot of money from appreciation, you will at least store the wealth within the real estate according to inflation. So you will not lose money, or Singapore has a good track record of not losing money in real estate investment, right? Which is why a lot of people like to put money in Singapore property, right? Including myself. I have lots of there's this perception that some people watch my videos say, hey, Ryan, you love Malaysia, you don't love Singapore. I love Singapore. Yeah. Singapore is has helped me a lot, right? I own a lot of real estate in Singapore as well, right? But there is a limit to how much Singapore investments you can do, right? Because of the way government rules are, because of ABSD, because of TDSR, right? There is a limit, right? How much Singapore property you can buy, and because prices are moving up so fast, right? Not a lot of people can catch up to buy Singapore real estate, especially if you're young, right? Especially, or even if you're a retiree, you have a couple $100,000, which is a lot of money, right? But you can't do anything in Singapore with a couple $100,000, right? In Malaysia, a couple $100,000 can get you quite a far. can get you quite far. And if prices do pick up in Malaysia again, that kind of money you can, it's a good return, right? Compared to anything that you can do in Singapore. Of course, it's higher risk, but it's a good return, right? Higher risk, high return. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, in Malaysia, prices are still affordable. Cost of living, cost of doing business is affordable, which is why I say that the spillover effect from Singapore is quite important, because Singapore will realize, hey, it's quite expensive to own property here or to rent here, right? Rentals in Singapore are very high now. It's expensive to do business in Singapore now. So a lot of them will consider doing business in Iskandar, where it's cheaper, right, and nearby, right? And that's a very important point. I think businesses will appreciate what I'm trying to say here about this point, right? And we see it all the time, right? Lots of Singapore factories have relocated to Johor. A lot of Singapore businesses have what we call business process outsourcing also done in Johor, right? And if you're concerned about spending time in Malaysia, right, you do have a residency available via the Malaysia My Second Home. It's not difficult to apply. Approval rates are fairly okay, right? And if you consider doing that retire in Malaysia or work in Malaysia, no, live in Malaysia, work in Singapore kind of scenario, MM2H is one option for you, right? So if you go to specifics, Singapore has a lot of specifics. I'm not going to go into detail. I've written some points here, right? There are a lot of restrictions for foreigners if you buy a residential property. There are a lot of restrictions also for Singaporeans if you buy a residential property. You buy the first one is okay. After the first one, it becomes progressively more difficult. So some Singaporeans have looked into, I realize, commercial property or industrial property, right? Commercial property, if you talk about pure shop or shop house, the problem is that prices are high. You may require a lot of capital for commercial property. If you look at industrial property in Singapore, while the yields are very good, the problem with them typically is that they have very low lease and hence unlikely to have any capital appreciation, right? My whole theory about property investment is that rental yield is good. Good cash flow is always important, but ultimately you make the big money when there is capital gain. If there's not enough capital gain, the money that you make is fairly small. You may live a good lifestyle from good cash flow, but I mean, you do not make the big money. The big bucks come from capital appreciation. So that's why I don't like industrial property in Singapore, because there is no capital appreciation. But some people do buy it for yield. I mean, that's their choice, because interest rates in Singapore have traditionally been very low, right? So that's why some people buy for rental yield, right? But in Malaysia, the plus points is foreigners can buy pretty much anything. You can buy freehold, you can buy leasehold. There is freehold. You can buy landed, you can buy condo, right? Foreigners are restricted in very few things, right? So if you are a Singaporean, you go to Malaysia to buy property, you can buy most stuff, not everything. You can't buy agricultural land, for example, right? But you can buy pretty much everything else, right? And that's good, right? Because in some countries you can't. In there is a minimum price threshold though. If I use the case of Johor, it's a minimum price of 1 million ringgit, right? 1 million ringgit. So you cannot buy anything cheaper than that in the secondary market, or even for some new projects, right? But some old projects actually are still using old threshold, but for by and large, it's 1 million ringgit. So about 300 over thousand Sing dollars, right, to buy for foreigners, right? In Johor. Other states may have a lower price point, but normally like those places like Malacca or Pahang, they are not as developed economies anyway, right? So, but we talk about Johor case, it's 1 million ringgit, right? You can also sell to anyone, right? You can sell to locals, you can sell to foreigners, right? Once you buy. But I mean, I want to go back to the point. I'll talk about it later. If you want to sell back to locals, you must buy something that local want to buy, right? Right. We shall talk about it later. Okay. And you can get financing. Singaporeans can get normally 70 to 85% financing. That is not too difficult, right? If you have your pay slips and stuff like that, your income documents, 70 to 85% financing is okay. And this is financing from Malaysian bank. So it does not impact your financing in Singapore, because if you take bank loan in Singapore, it will affect things like your other Singapore purchases in the future. So it's always wise, advisable, if you ask me, to take the financing from Malaysian bank. Okay, and of course you get legal ownership of the title, right? Similar laws like Singapore, there will be a title issued, strata title, all these individual titles, same concept as Singapore, right? Because Singapore and Malaysia have all former British colony follow the same rule of law. Okay, so it's important to have legal ownership of title, because in some cases, you may not really own title, right? Like like last time Thailand you cannot own land title, right? But I think now I heard they're going to do it. But I mean, yeah, this is important, legal ownership of title. Okay, so those are the high level specifics. I mean, I don't want to go into too detailed, because that's like really a full-blown class, right? But those are some of the basic things to remember. Okay, so what is my approach, right? If you are like me, a Malaysian working in Singapore, and you are maybe PR or working towards PR, or you could be a Singaporean already. You could be Singaporean, who has interest to buy in Malaysia. You could be a former Malaysian, you converted to Singaporean. That's fine, right? That's your personal choice. I have nothing against it, right? How would you approach if you live in Singapore, you earn Sing dollar, right? Property investment. So this is the way I look at it, right? After being in Singapore for over 10 years. Number one, if you are a Singaporean or Singaporean PR, you should buy Singapore. Right, you already have this advantage already because Singaporean don't pay ABSD. Singapore PR pay low ABSD. You should buy because as a form of wealth preservation, even capital appreciation, if you buy right, lots of people do this. That I'll talk about it. You should put money into Singapore property first, and you have to put money into Singapore property first because also of how Singapore property rules work, right? Because if you want to buy Singapore HDB, right, or condo, for example, typically you cannot own other residential property outside. So you have to buy Singapore first. So if you can afford it, or if you can have the finances to do it, you should buy your Singapore property first. HDB, condo, it doesn't really matter, right? EC, right? Everyone has a different financial profile, but if you can do it, do that first. If you cannot, right, if you really cannot, your income's not high enough, then of course you look at JB, right? JB is a good proxy for Singapore, right? I mean, I said time and time again, Iskandar is actually a subset of the Singapore economy, right? Iskandar Malaysia is really a subset of the Singapore economy, right? It depends more on Singapore than it does on KL, right? Economically, right? Economically. So if you cannot buy Singapore direct, Iskandar is a good proxy, right? Number two, if you live in Singapore today and you can afford to buy Singapore property, this asset progression model, I mean, if you're not familiar with this term, you come and talk to me about it. But asset progression model is basically, buy HDB, buy correctly, of course, right? Buy HDB, wait out your MOP period, sell, you have a few 100,000 cashback, capital appreciation. You decouple where husband go and buy one, what do you call that, condo, wife go and buy another investment property. It's quite a typical model, right? The asset progression is, in short, I've written here, right? What is asset progression, right? In the brackets, right, on my second point. That's basically what asset progression is. It's what a lot of agents teach in Singapore. It's what a lot of property investment groups teach in Singapore, right? Asset progression model. Because this is how it works in Singapore, right? You graduate, you get married, you buy HDB, right? That model is a very common model for a lot of Singaporeans, right? Or people who live in Singapore, right? So it works, right? I mean, some agents tell you it doesn't work or it's some bullshit, but I believe in asset progression model. It works fine, right? It's a good way to build wealth, build some capital in your bank account, right? In Singapore, right? If you can do that, do the asset progression model. It may take you 10, 15, 20 years to complete the first cycle, right? But that's fine, right? You will make good money. It's pretty safe. The track record has been there. You should do it. If you need help about this point, ask me, right? I'll explain to you in detail, right? If you've never heard about asset progression model in Singapore before. Number three, if you have gone through asset progression model or you cannot afford to buy Singapore, then you should look at Iskandar as a proxy, right? And the four reasons here, number one, easy to understand, nearby. I think real estate is always local, right? I last time I used to buy property in the US. There was one point I had a bungalow in the US. It gave me great yield, right? Actually, at that time I had 11% yield. I still remember. Freehold single story bungalow in the US, 11% yield. Because we buy during, because that time US got financial crisis, right? So property price dropped 70%, okay? You always buy when it's bleeding, right? The people are blood on the streets, right? So I bought a property like 70% off, gave me 11% yield. But the reason why I sold it after some time, because I couldn't manage it, right? It's in the US. How much can you do, right? You will not be able to look at it. You can't tell if the market's improving or not. You are relying on a lot of third-party information, right? Even if the rental go up, you also don't. Rental go down also, you don't know how you want to verify. It's very difficult, right? You need a lot of partners on the ground, and it's a lot of work, right? So one reason why I say real estate is local, it's always best to manage property that you can manage and it's nearby, right? So nearby is important, right? So if Singapore you cannot do, right, JB is at least a lot more easier to manage and to understand. compared to Singapore, right? And a lot of you here may have gone to JB a lot, right? Spend more time in JB. I suggest you do. If you have not been to JB before or haven't been to JB in some time, go and do it. Otherwise, if not, in a few years' time, it's a lot easier when RTS is completed, right? And a high potential because of big difference in price. I talk about it in a lot of my other videos. Look at my earlier video before this. There's a large market because of Singaporeans who are priced out of the Singapore market. Malaysians who work in Singapore who are priced out of the Singapore market, right? They will look at JB at some point, right? Even today, rentals in JB are doing very well. It's not a very well spoken fact because rentals in Singapore are so expensive. A lot of people have just gone to JB to rent, right? I just read a story about foreign exchange students from NUS. Yeah, I mean they're from Europe, from US. Come to NUS to study. Okay, foreign exchange students. They cannot afford the rentals in Singapore. Yeah, they got kicked out by their landlord, right? And they rent in JB. Yeah, can you imagine rent in JB and to go to NUS to university? I think that's not logical, right? Eventually, they still came back to Singapore because the travel time is too far, right? I agree, right? If you want to go to school, you want to go to university in Singapore, it's not wise to stay in JB, right? I don't think it's a logical solution, right? But at some point, temporarily, they were doing it because rent in Singapore is so high. But this is what I mean by the price differential in Singapore and JB is too much, right? But JB is always considered as an option because it's nearby. Okay, and I think the RTS, which later I'll talk about it in a bit more detail, completing in 2026 is a big catalyst, right? When this is ready, you will see Singapore JB prices move up again just due to the interest, right? This is like a catalyst. People feel, hey, if the MRT is up, right, then it's a lot more worth it to stay in JB, right? And people start to look at JB, and you'll see some strong interest in the JB property price that will push prices up again. So this is the reason why I tell people in Singapore, look Iskandar, right? Iskandar is easy to go, yeah. No one don't have to take flight ticket lah, have to, you can take a bus if you really cannot rent a car, take a bike, right? JB is pretty near. Okay, of course you avoid some of the peak period jams, but JB is pretty near. Okay, and fourth, Malaysian property has been a down cycle since 2013. Prices at the low. A lot of property in JB now are selling at what I call below replacement cost. That means if you get another developer to build the same condo again, they can't build it for the same price they're selling now because construction costs have gone up. There's inflation, land price may or may not have moved, but whatever it is, because of construction costs alone, another developer cannot build back the same property for the same price, and that to me is a good buy, right? Because you are buying below replacement costs, right? And that's as good a deal as you can get. It cannot be free, right? You cannot buy property for free, right? But this is a good deal, right? I recently we just took a commercial freehold property in JB, right? I think about 60% cheaper, 60%, yeah, and potentially over 10% yield. We are now waiting for keys now, right? But this shows you what kind of deals are available right now because of the down cycle, right? We don't know it's the bottom. It's probably near the bottom already. I can't see Malaysia going any more bottom than this, right? Right? If summer bottom, then I mean Malaysia, Holland already. But I mean, yeah, can't be that. Election is coming soon in Malaysia. I think that would be a help stabilize the government and push Malaysia politics into a better place, right? Yeah. So 3 tips, right? I'm going to share 3 tips, right? What I feel that you should also take note if you're investing in Malaysia. Number one, local prefer landed. I think I said it just now. In Johor, especially because land is still somewhat there, right, compared to KL or Penang. KL or Penang, this is probably not so apparent, but in Johor, I think locals still prefer landed. One reason why a lot of Singaporeans who got burnt investing in Iskandar, myself included, in the past 10 years, is that we buy a lot of condo, right? We bought a condo, right? And you realize later when you get keys, actually the local don't want to buy condo from you. Their budget may be okay one. They can't afford to buy that condo from you. But they say, hey, at this price, I better go buy a terrace house or semi-D or whatever. And that's what they've been doing. If you look at today's market, the landed property market is doing well, better. In fact, if you were bought in a landed property in Iskandar 10 years ago at the peak of the cycle, I'm pretty sure you are able to sell one. Right, you may not, even if you sell the loss lah, you bought something bad in a bad location, or you never take care of your property, the house got run down a bit, right? You sell the bad price, you can still sell. There are a lot of people who bought condo in JB and they got stuck, they can't sell, right? Nobody want to buy from them, or they won't buy at a good price, like at least. But landed in JB, right, it has done pretty well in the past 10 years, even during this down cycle period. I mean, it didn't go as bad as it looks. So that's what I'm trying to say. Consider the point that local prefer landed, or that if you're going to buy a place, if you're going to invest in the area, ideally the area don't have landed, so they don't compete with you. Okay, so like people ask me, hey, JB City Center, I want to buy landed there. But the problem with landed in JB city centers, of course, there's not gated guarded. They're pretty old landed property. So unless you buy with intention to refurbish or re-renovate, all right, I think it's difficult to buy landed in JB city center. So in that case, you can consider high rise, right? But if you're going to buy somewhere in the suburb area like Austin, all that, I mean, do buy landed if you can, because when you buy landed, you are more likely to get a better value, better resale market from local Malaysians, right? Consider that, right? Consider that. Number two, look at developers who have unsold stock, right? And that's where all the good deals are today, right? That's where all the good deals are today, because what happened in the past 5-10 years, right, is that a lot of developers completed their projects, right? A lot of these are condo projects, by the way, and they still have unsold stock anywhere from 20%, yeah, 20, 30, 40% unsold stock, and it's completed. The property is completed. You can very likely see them today, the actual unit, right? And the developer will sell at a discount because they need to monetize this stock. They cannot be holding on to it forever. There's holding costs, right? So they're selling to you at a discounted prices, right? These projects. So that's where the bargains are. Go and look at this. And normally the package is also done very well. You can get free legal fee, free MOT, a lot of free stuff if you buy from developer unsold stock unit. So that's where the good deals are, the bargains, right? And third one is, do look at where the RTS station is completing, because as I mentioned earlier, the MRT coming linking Woodlands North to JB, right, completes in 2026, end of 2026. That's another 4 years from now, right? When that is ready, right, you will see the boom. And where's the biggest beneficiary? Anything that's near the MRT station, right? So there are a few projects, right, which are near the MRT station. Do look at it there. They are all high rise, because in city center you cannot get landed. It's very difficult to get landed. If you can get good landed, right, it's a good deal, but I think it's not easy. but yeah, so look at anything near the MRT station. That's also another tip that I'm trying to say. So these are 3 tips I'm telling people when you want to buy JB. Do take note of this, right? When you look at JB, if you're not sure, can always come and find me for more questions. And then for the recently the Southern Corridor of Malaysia, great guys. They're very good at this drone video thing. They've taken a shot of the construction progress of the RTS. You can see that all the way to Singapore. Yeah, see if you this photo, right, the end here, this is Singapore, right? This photo was taken from the JB side, right? So you can see the JB side, they start building tracks already. Singapore also the viaduct also is also under construction right now, right? And progress looks good, right? Singapore, I think the station development is also quite detailed already, because Singapore station is goes underground, and so there's a lot of work there. Malaysia station is actually above ground, so maybe they don't have so much problem. But Singapore station is got underground. There's some portion of it which is underground, right? If you want to find out more, do look at my earlier videos. I did some videos about this earlier as well. Okay, so this is a big catalyst. A lot of people are not paying attention to this right now, and I think this will be the big shocker. And I think it's good for us to be an investor to make maximum gain. We have to be a bit ahead of the curve. My mistake 10 years ago was that we invest into at the height of the market, right, at the top of the market, which was the mistake, right? We didn't we thought the market would push up further, and we were wrong, right? And we bought at the top of the market, and this is the reason why a lot of Singaporeans those days lost money. But I think sometimes it's like this: you have to avoid the herd mentality, right? I got caught in the herd mentality as well. Today, I don't think I'm herd mentality. I'm probably one of the few people still advocating to buy Iskandar, right? Now even more so than ever, because prices are cheaper, right? But the fundamentals are still the same. So and I think this is going to be a big shocker, right? Like even Iskandar in 2007, 2008, right? In the early days, a lot of people buy, but a lot of people buy, but I mean, some people buy, but a lot of people don't believe. They are the people who made a lot of money in Iskandar, Malaysia, right? Those days they buy Horizon Hills at like 300,000 ringgit. Even today, they still make money because they buy at 300,000 ringgit, so cheap, right? So they double, triple their money, like more than triple. It depends on how much they borrow for loan, right? If you cash on cash, I think they easily 400, 500% return. So this is the type of return we're looking at, right? Trying to catch if you can buy at the bottom of the market, which is what is going on right now. Okay, thank you very much. If you like my video today, do like this video, share, subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will also put the link to my TikTok in the video description later. And if any questions, please drop me WhatsApp or call me at my Singapore or Malaysian number there below. We have a Facebook group called Malaysian Investors in Singapore. Hope to see you there. We talk about Malaysian news and Singapore property news there as well. Thank you very much and enjoy.